Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to Las Doctoras podcast, episode 49. We just
49.
checked. And we are happy to have on a repeat guest, a guest that we've had before. And before I hand it over, I just want to acknowledge that she was our very first guest on our very first episode, which, by the way, we will be celebrating exactly 4 years this Saturday.
I love it. Renee puts them in the calendar and I love it. It's so exciting. I see it coming.
I'm all about anniversaries.
So I know.
I mean, so I have to say that we recorded 4 years ago. And we had to record the episode 3 times because our tech was off, our audio was off. We were all still trying to figure out what was happening. So,
and we were meeting in person. Remember, we were at
we met in person.
Every time we were at your house, your old house. That was so fun.
The first time, the one that we just could not salvage was at your house, though, Cristina.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, the very first, and then it was a mess. It was a mess, but
she's been there, and we love the conversations. I think that, yes, it was all this tech issues, but I love that we all just really liked talking and having those conversations too.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about our homie who was willing to just record a bunch of times for us. So without further ado, please introduce yourself, amiga.
Hey, what's up? Hello. This is Danellia Arechiga, aka Dane, aka the Multidimensional Mami. And you guys are so funny with this 3-episode thing. I think it's important for folks to understand that at the time we were in a collective and we were in creative spaces, we were in community, and we were coming up with ideas for ways to express ourselves more authentically. And so when you two said we're gonna start a thing, we're gonna be Las Doctoras, we're starting a podcast, I was like, cool, how can I help? What can I do? I want to learn. I'm in this with you because I've always wanted to start a podcast myself. And so when you all brought that up, it was an easy yes for me, because I feel like it was in alignment with my own journey, and I wanted to learn together. I was inspired by you all, and I think we inspired each other. And then how often do we get to have alone time to play with our friends and sit around the table and talk shit and drink tequila and snack on munchies,
play space.
It's playful. It's play for us.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I'm super proud of you both. I've been watching you, listening to you, absorbing all of the wonderful content you've been putting out.
Well, the thing is, I want to mention that you came back, for a conversation, I think the following season, around money and shame. And it feels so beautiful, full circle, to come back to the conversation today that we're going to have too, and I love this play space. It makes me think of brave space and play space. I just this is beautiful.
Yeah. But tell us all the things, your ancestors, your astrology. What do you do? What's your medicine?
All right. How much time do y'all have? Okay. So my name is Danellia. My ancestors are so my maternal side is from Torreon, Coahuila, which I'm still kind of doing research on, because it's so new to me. I've been digging for these types of stories around where my family's from. So thank you for asking that question, because it's important to me to remind myself, to even just say the name, even just to claim the space of that is where my ancestors are from, as far as I can trace them so far, and then my zodiac is, I'm an Aries sun, Leo moon, and Cancer rising.
Ooh.
It's a lot of fun being me for that reason. But I would say that I'm a very emotional person. I'm a very sensitive person, and I'm also a very intense person sometimes. And I think my big 3 really reflect that, those main points. lately I've been really trying to tap into the part of me that is dominant, that takes up space, that is commanding, that is fierce and unafraid. But there were so many years of my life that part of me was shamed, mostly by cis or questioning men who I think had like issues with their own identity around masculinity and women and how they should act and how they should be. And so it was kind of like I feel like it was squeezed out of me in some ways, you know. And now I'm like reclaiming that. And so that's what I'm working on right now, in my work, in my music, in my so my main form of like work the last 10 years has been birth work. I've been a birth worker for 10 years. And my daughter's 10. I've been a parent for 10 years. So I've really been working with families and pregnant folks, expectant folks. But over the last couple of years, my work has shifted into more like liberation activism and really helping people connect to the tools that work for them to liberate whatever parts of themselves have been locked away for fear of whatever, abandonment, judgment, shame, all of the things that hold us back from being who the fuck we've always been, So anyway, this is why I love being with y'all, because you two in our play spaces that we create, we bring that out of each other. I feel like we can see each other's younger selves and like we connect with each other's and we play and we create. So I'm super happy to be here, y'all.
Thank you.
I just, ever since we met, again, we were in this Latina Mothers Collaborative when we maybe first had our bigger conversations and when we recorded the first podcast. I just want to like bear witness. I have always, I love hearing you name that you're stepping into this assertive, like, this is who you are. I'm dominant, I love this. And I think that has always how I have witnessed you, it's so interesting. I've always been grateful to be able to interact with you because I see the feeling and I also see the assertiveness and I feel like a long time ago, Renee and I were told that we should have more Aries people in our lives. And so, and I get every time I'm like, thank you, Dana, for being in that,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that really brings us to what we want to talk about today, which is, thinking back to our very first podcast episode and where we were talking about shame and menstruation, right? And I think we kind of all spoke to our journey with our menstrual cycle and how much shame was tied to that and how that is so much a part of, patriarchy and white supremacy and all of those things. And I think that on one hand, over the last 4 years, as people do, right, we all evolve, both in terms of our understanding of that shame, but also in our processing that shame, right? And trying to reclaim the parts of ourselves that shame took away. And I think for us, witnessing you and your journey and seeing where you've gone in your journey is amazing. And we all, text message each other and, supportive of each other in so many ways. And I think that, I just want maybe speak to what your journey has been, even in the last maybe year or a few months. We've been witnessing like a new, I don't know, a rebirth, right? Or maybe it's always been there and you're just sharing it publicly more. But tell us like where you're at and how you, what your evolution has been over the last couple of years.
Like mariposa.
Yeah.
It's funny to hear you say that because I'm thinking like, what has it been like? What has it been that's changed? What is like the underlying factor that has led me to make changes in my life?
It has me thinking, Renee, actually, about like, yeah, this coinciding with our growth. At first I was like, tell us how this all happened within COVID, you know, let's start in 2020. let's go back, you know, but and I think we can, but I think most recently, right, we've been really talking about this, our own catharsis, kind of our own.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to think back, right? And think like, what have we been through? Sometimes we're just like doing the work, going, and then we're like, wait, how did I end up here? You know? Yeah, I think it does go back to like 2019, 2020 when I decided to be a surrogate. And I think in a lot of ways that was a coming out of sorts for me, because people in my circle were kind of surprised, you know, like, you would do that? Like, what? And it's like people didn't really understand the circumstances, you know. It wasn't like I didn't go through an agency or anything. It was like a private internal like small group that was involved in making this happen. And it was all family, it was all love, you know. It was like a friend of a friend type of thing. And but being pregnant again, knowing everything I know about birth now after 10 years of a career as a birth doula, like being able to, for me, like I got a lot out of it too. Like, yes, these people really wanted a baby and they wanted me to be the vessel for that, the portal for that. But I wanted something out of it too. I wanted to feel what it was like to be pregnant again. I wanted to experience pregnancy without being fearful. I wanted to show my daughter this act of, you know, in a way, it feels like an act of service to someone, you know, to be of service to them in a way that I felt empowered to be. I understand not everyone will feel that way. Some people have very interesting views on surrogacy, you know, but in this case, like I felt that it was the right thing to do. It felt like perfect alignment for me and my family. And it was because it completely changed me. So I stepped into that pregnancy knowing like I wanted to like create something from it. You know, I wanted to like go through a rebirth, a rebirth. Every pregnancy, every child we have changes us in a new way. It challenges us in a new way. And this was a whole nother level, you know. I was pregnant for 10 months and then gave this baby to their parents and then started to have my own, you know, new chapter of like, okay, what's next? How does this impact me? What does this teach me about myself? And to be quite honest with you all, like I felt like a fucking goddess. I was like,
you were
like,
glowing.
yes.
I remember when you were pregnant and you were glowing. I was like, God damn, you look good.
Those were some really good beach days. I just loved them. Yeah. I was just like, I'm with a goddess on the beach.
I was feeling myself, you know. I felt really good about my decision to go through with this. I felt like I was really supported. I had a whole community of people who were cheering me on and were like fascinated by my story and wanting to help and be there for me. And it was wonderful, you know. I felt like a goddess. And I think that's where things really shifted for me, because it was like if I could feel this sexy pregnant with a big old belly, you know, why can't I feel sexy postpartum when I still have a little belly, you know? Like, what's the difference? It's a cycle. It's a part of our lives. It's the reality of what happens to our bodies when we are the vessel bringing life into the world. It's a big fucking deal, and people need to like act like they know. Okay.
Yeah. It's so interesting, right? The question was like, how did this happen? And you're like, birth. You know, I gave birth. I carried, I gave birth, you know, and I think that's actually an answer for Renee and I a lot, actually, in our work. And also, I just want to name that what you're saying about wanting to, I would love to have like to be pregnant again, like for all those things, you know, or
You
even I don't, I'm 43. It's not happening, but also, and like the community, the midwifery, like the care,
yeah.
all of it. It's so beautiful. I love that you were
I
able
think
to step into that
I
business.
don't feel like I would ever want to be pregnant again. But if I were, I think the community that I would be surrounded by would be so different than my first two births. And I do agree that giving birth and having children was a huge like turning point, you know, and really, like you said, has you kind of thinking, what am I waiting for? Or why can't, like, I love that you said, like, if I can feel this sexy when I'm pregnant, why can't I? Like, that's a big thing, you know, for you to say that. And I think that that's what I've been witnessing in you over, you know, even the last few months, just even your presence on Instagram and social media. Um, and even like, I know sometimes it triggers in me, like, oh my God, like, there's still so much work that I have to do around my own relationship with sexiness and all of that. And I think a lot of it has to do, I mean, just so we name that, you know, there's trauma, you know, there's sexual trauma in a lot of different ways for so many of us. So to step into any kind of space of sexuality can sometimes trigger that trauma. I think for me, I've processed so much of that as like, I know, so for me, there was a point where I understood the power of my sexuality, but only under like, only within my ability to get attention from men. Right. So it was always focused solely on that. Like my sexuality was about this thing about, you know,
The
getting
male
men's
gaze,
attention.
the phallocentric
The male gaze
Yeah.
completely. And so much of sexuality in our society is defined, constructed, performed through the male gaze. And so I think there's a lot of it is like rejection of that, like not wanting, you know, to like play into these, you know, stereotypes. But then on the other hand, how do we reclaim or feel comfortable in our bodies in a way that's both not tied to that, but still like, well, yeah, how do we reclaim sexuality in a way that's divesting from the male gaze, but still feels true and authentic to who we are?
Yeah. So earlier you mentioned like shame and how we've talked about that in different capacities, but I think that was the first step for me. It was like being able to identify where the shame originates. Because we know that shame is a manipulation tool. It's how you get people to feel like they've done something wrong. You don't know something's wrong until someone tells you they think it is. And if it's somebody that you've put a lot of power in, you've given a lot of your power away to it, as far as like that they know better than you, right? Whereas I feel like when we're in alignment with our true intentions outside of what everyone else thinks and believes about what we should be doing, then we're able to make decisions out of like pure intention. And usually I feel like for most people, it's out of love, you know, it's out of seeking pleasure, seeking joy, seeking like the good things in life. But I don't know. I feel like we have to focus on unlearning the shame, finding the shame where it originates, and then really taking a really critical look at where that happened. You know, I'll give you a really simple example of how shame can impact the way that we see ourselves, right? And the way that we express ourselves. I had an ex that I felt comfortable expressing myself with creatively at first, but then I would get a lot of kickback about my ideas. So for example, like from the way that I dressed, you know, I was always like, why are you wearing that? Or like, you know, like making little comments about like my appearance. One time I was wearing like dark lipstick and he was like, I don't like when you wear that color. It looks like he didn't like it, you know? And so I never wore it. I never wore it again. That's how male gaze works, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
A guy tells you what he likes, what he doesn't like about you, and then you aspire to be that.
We internalize it. We internalize that expectation. Mm-hmm.
Right. And we've gotten that for a lot of us. We've gotten that our whole lives, right? Whether it's from like lovers or boyfriends or friends, fathers, family, brothers, uncles, you know, people, everyone, anyone who's, and not just men, I would say anyone who has given us their opinion about our appearance, about the way we present ourselves, about the way we express ourselves. Anyone, because it could be our moms, it could be our sisters, it could be anyone.
You're the daughter of like, you know, hairstylists and like makeup art, like it's their, I can think of so much coming up for me because these are microaggressions, right? And they're so little, but they make,
and I think
all
you're
the difference.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, Cristina, you're right. You know, we always have to say, like, I grew up, my mom's livelihood was beauty, right? And beauty within a very particular standard of beauty, because that was her job. That was her livelihood. I literally grew up in a salon, right? I was there every day.
I knew my colors from when I was young, right? Are you in autumn or winter? Like it was such a big thing in the 80s, I think, particularly.
Yeah.
You know,
and I think, and so there was such an emphasis because my mom also was very much like, she kind of had this perception like she was a walking advertisement, right? So she always had to look good because, you know, that was, you know, she was a walking advertisement of her skills. And then me being a reflection of her, that was the imposed expectation as well. And so, you know, there's that interesting dynamic. And I also think that the grace that I give to my mom is also remembering that for her generation, for her to survive patriarchy was to abide by it, right? And here we are of a generation that has the audacity to say, no, fuck that. We're not going to abide by it. We're going to reject it. And the fear from our mothers comes in, what's going to happen? What danger are you putting yourself in when you're rejecting these things that have helped us to survive for so many generations, right? And so I know that my mom, when she would get upset with me about if I wore something or whatever, it wasn't that like
dark lipstick for some reason that really stuck with me.
It wasn't that like she didn't necessarily like it. It was, and she couldn't verbalize that, right? She couldn't put that to words to say, I am afraid of what might happen to you if you reject your gender this much, right? If you reject these expectations this much, you are putting yourself in a vulnerable position that I cannot save you from. Of course, again, they were not verbalizing in that, but now that I can put it into context and I can see, she was afraid for me. And so her only way to help me to survive was to say, you need to follow these rules, to police, you know, all of those things.
And now that voice is in our head, right? Now that voice is kind of internalized, you know? Yes. And so, but then, so I'm always checking, you know, like myself, even though I'm trying, and I have to be so conscious to not. And then of course, Danellia, I really appreciate you sharing, like someone else saying things like that, commenting, you know, it's about your lipstick or about what you're wearing is, you know, it's so clear to me that that's not welcome. It's not, you know, it's
like, who asked you, right?
It's a microaggression, right? And actually what makes it even more clear to me, and again, you know, gratitude for being a parent, is like how I interact with my kid, how we interact with our kids. We would not tell them, you know, like, I don't like what you're wearing, you know, or something like that. Like, I know this is a different like situation, but like that would not be something that, you know, we're always trying to figure out how to bring out their magic, right? Just let it be, you know, clear the space for them to be themselves. And I think in sensuality or in sexuality in all those spaces, I think there's magic there, and finding people who can just be like, let's let it be. Yeah, this is exciting. And any of this expression.
Yeah. And this has me thinking of, you know, because it's Trans Awareness Week, right? Is it this week or was it last week? And
I think it's this week.
It was last week, right? Yeah. I don't know. It was, you know, recently. And this person was talking about, you know, this, when people talk about, how can kids decide if they're trans, you know, because their brain isn't fully developed. And this trans person who's also some sort of doctorate in psychology or something, was talking about like really putting that into perspective, and to say that what it means for our brain, the prefrontal, whatever all that terminology is, right? For it to be fully developed, prefrontal cortex, right? Yes. So, and that actually what that does is it creates inhibitions, right? So we kind of understand what not to do based on, anyway. And so he was saying that actually when we're children, because we have less inhibitions, right? That we're more authentically ourselves when we're children than when we are adults. And so I think about even when I was in high school, and this was the era of like, I know I was a big No Doubt fan. I wanted to be Gwen Stefani. And she was, she would,
me too.
she would always wear these like tiny little crop tops, but then still very masculine, because she was, she was the leader of this, band and stuff. And so I feel like I played with that a lot, like, but I got policed a lot, and in my head, I was like, I don't get it. Like, what's the big deal? I mean, obviously the underlying big deal was that I would be overly sexualized, and, and which was true, because that did actually happen. I was overly sexualized, but I think I was frustrated in that, like, that's not my fault, right? Like that has nothing to do with me. But again, it had me internalizing that, like, oh, I'm going to be asking for that if I dress like that. And so there was a way in which, as I got older, I started to, especially as my body changed and stuff, like, just wanted to cover up more to protect my own self from that over sexualization. And so it had me, a lot more inhibited about how I express my sexuality, which is, I think, why seeing where you come and seeing how you're kind of taking that back. Like, I would really love to hear you speak to, like, your pole dancing and all of that kind of stuff, and how that's helped you to kind of, I mean, if you're willing.
Can I also add
say something, Cristina? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add the nuanced conversation around, like, we're talking about perceptions around gender, how people are read, as far as gender, but I think we are also talking about the conversation around people's perception around race or culture, or, and our family's perspective. When it comes to their concerns about us, not just because we presented femme or as women, but also because of how we presented it in a white world too. So, and I actually think, Dane, that you also, like, I think head on kind of look at this.
And that's where the dark lipstick stuff comes from too, right? Because that was so much associated with being a chola.
Totally. Yeah. Even though we were trying to go grunge.
Right. So I know, right? Oh my God. So this is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that. So as I'm telling you, like, part of the process is like identifying that shame, right? And where it comes from. What we're hearing is that our loved ones were trying to protect us from perhaps unwanted attention. So they're teaching us that, if we go out of the house a certain way, we might attract a certain type of attention. I also experienced myself more of the fear that other people will think, like you said, a chola, a whore, a sex worker, whatever you want to put there, but the fear that you might come off across as somebody who is sexual, who is sexual, regardless of how you use your sexuality, how you practice your sexuality, if you get paid for your sexuality. Like the shame is always revolved around being just someone who perhaps has sex or enjoys sex, God forbid.
Or it's not even about sex sometimes, right? It's about just the desire or the pleasure, because it's so much. You had me thinking about purity culture, right? Because when I was, a child, even if I wasn't actually desiring actual sex, but I wanted even my own body, like, you know what I mean? Even within my own body, like self-pleasure, but even that was shamed so much. So, because I think we get so caught up in this idea of, like, if we talk about sex with children, it means that they're having sex. And I'm like, there's so much between sex and all this other things that we forget that it, like you said, that we are a sexual being. Sexual being does not mean sex per se.
Right.
It can
Right.
be, but it can mean so much more.
Right. So what I'm finding is that outside of just penis and vagina sex,
Yes, exactly.
or penetrative, or I would say penetrative sex, there's so much more. And it's not, you're right, it's not so much sex, but it's sensuality. And when I think of sensuality, I think the senses. It's sensual. You're literally using all of your senses to engage in similar hormone increases that you would experience in sex, oxytocin and adrenaline and all that good stuff that makes us feel amazing, right? All the cortisol, but you're not even having sex. Sometimes it's just using your imagination. Sometimes it's just like, honestly, what has worked for me is like learning how to turn myself on, learning how to look at myself in the mirror and be like, damn girl, what's up? Like, like honestly, because if I don't feel that way, and then I try to go out into the world and pretend that I do, like that doesn't do me any justice. I have to believe it before I go out into the world and expect to receive it, and a lot of that has come from questioning these fears of judgment around like, because again, what we're hearing is like, these are words that our families have told us. So we internalize them, and we literally, sometimes I hear the words in my mind as I'm going through my closet. Like, oh, I can't wear that, it's too short. Oh, I can't wear that, it's too revealing. Oh, I can't wear that, it's, and it's like, why the fuck not? I don't want to be constricted when I'm out. If I'm feeling myself, I want to feel myself. If I think I look cute in the mirror, fuck anyone who doesn't think I look cute. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that I feel comfortable, that I can move my body in the ways that feel good when I'm going dancing, or when I'm going to be doing something physical, then I'm going to dress however I feel comfortable, whether that means like sweats and a crop top, because that's what feels comfortable for me, Gwen Stefani style with like baggy pants and like a cute little, like, it's also the way that we express our masculinity. It's not just, like you said, it's not just the sexual fear, but like, what if people think you're gay? Oh my God, what if people think, you look like a tomboy or whatever? Like, these are like the little, the things that we were fed.
We've got old trauma around that too.
They still come up. But as I've changed my mind, I've done a lot of mindset work, changing, like questioning those fears and being like, number one, they're not mine. And I've spent so much time trying to pinpoint like, well, why did she feel that way? And where did she go through? And really doing the research behind my family's values. And understanding who they were, to understand why they got to those conclusions. And then I was fed those lies, essentially, in a lot of cases. Granted, we know they were doing it. They are, and we know they were doing it to protect us, but we lost our autonomy in those situations. We were forced to like fit in these little confinements, and at this point in my work, I'm really focused on embracing, like you said, that younger version before the inhibitions come in, because I remember that kid, and that's where all this like reflective work has led me to, like, who is she and what did she really like? What did she really want? What did she really enjoy? And honestly, when I think back to my younger self was very sexual. She was very curious. She was very interested. And it wasn't just about sex. It was about like the human part of it. Like the fact that this almost like this is like a magical thing that our bodies does, is the ability to like get itself like excited. And I started experiencing that excitement like early. I feel like maybe not early, but for me, it was like, I don't know, first grade, second grade, I was just like falling in love with people already, and just so like overwhelmed by like, just
that's the cancer rising right there.
So I've been giving that little one a lot of permission to explore and to ask questions and to be unafraid of doing what feels good, because we all I feel like we have all done that. And then at some point somebody said like, why are you doing that? You shouldn't do that.
Ugh.
And then that
Yeah.
joy, whatever pleasure you experience, whatever joy, whatever excitement you experience, it goes away. It's a little dim to our spirit light, to our life force
Ugh.
energy, you know?
I think this is why we have to curate or be so discerning about who we bring into our spaces, into our circles. This is to me like the same thing with like not reading anything written by white culture, white people, white men in particular, reading women of color, but also like having these conversations and really holding, I think what we're talking about is this, a narrative that's like not about white savior, purity, all these other like penis, all this sex as one thing, culture. We're trying to like actively like throw that away, burn it in the fire, let it go, but
Yeah.
it takes so much, and we have to reframe that, to create the new narrative. And the new narrative is so simple, right? I love this. We are magic as children. We are in touch with our bodies and our sensuality. Like we know what we like. We we go after it. We seek it out. Like, and so to be in conversations like this, I think is where it's all at. And I want to just be in gratitude for it, because I actually don't know if people find this space, as much as in the ways that we have. So we can talk about shame and menstruation, shame and money, and now we're talking about shame and sexuality. And I think it's so beautiful that we can be here.
I agree. I think that if not for community, it would be very difficult to process, right? And because it's that internalized voice, and even if you can do work around, like you said, mindset work, and you can have this like inner battle, it's still within yourself, right? It's still individualized, and it's still in that it's an inner battle. But when you can, talk it out, and I think that's, even the three of us, when we've had conversations and we can say these things out loud and process them out loud with each other and then validate for each other, we're like, one, it's like, oh yeah, we're not the only ones who experience this, right? Two, okay, I'm not crazy, right? This is where it comes from. This is, and then we're able to get to this new place of like understanding and being able to process that shame. So I agree. I think without community, it would be difficult to come into, because too, like I'm thinking about, even just like where I was 20 years ago in terms of what I thought relationships, love, romance, marriage was supposed to be. And now I'm 15 years married, right? Like the way my values around that, like my values around love and romance and marriage, it's so starkly different, but because I've been able to unpack so much, and I'm not attached to these, I'm not as attached. I think there's still a lot of work I have to do, but I'm not as attached, right, to these expectations around what that's supposed to look like. And it just opens it up for, so much more. I mean, I think I'll name a few things. I think that for a long time, the idea that when you get married, that this person is supposed to meet all your needs, right? Romance, emotional, physical, financial, like everything. So that if they fall short, which of course they're going to fall short because no one can fucking do it all. Right. And so when they fall short, there's like something wrong in the relationship. And the minute that I understood that this one person does not have to meet all my needs, and that I can have a community of people, that, okay, he's not meeting my emotional needs, but I have Cristina I can call, or I have you. I've called you how many times on it to be like, I need to process what's going on. Right. Like, and so then it doesn't put that pressure on the marriage. But again, like, even 10 years ago, I don't think that I would have been free to feel that way, because I was still kind of in a certain bubble, but being in a community where there's a lot more support for looking at relationships from a different perspective, I'm not like, then I'm like, oh, I feel comfortable with this. And it's so much more expansive to think about it in that way. So, thinking about Cristina and I, we're like, it's kind of like a polyamorous situation, where, we have this deep love and emotional connection for each other. That again, within the idea of like cis het marriage is only supposed to be within that, dynamic.
I want to add something. Someone came to the door. I stopped out. So tell me if you've already covered this, but I think I'm in that part of my therapy journey with you all where I'm just tired about talking about that ex. I'm just like, F that. I don't want to talk about that person. And in this case, I don't want to talk about like, phallocentric sex at all. I don't want to talk about, the story of the knight in shining armor, who turns out to basically kidnap you or something. I don't know, like, all those narratives, all those Disney, all those everything. I'm just tired of them. I'm wanting to be a part of conversations and be inspired by people who are changing their language radically, who are living into expressions, and so then I like that you're doing this like to me in this outward expression. I think also I've been really leaning into being the generators again, Renee, like for the human design. And I think Daniella, you are a manifester generator. Do you know what you are? I forget. But basically you're out there and, it gives me life, it reminds me, that that old narrative's got nothing at all. And I can just like literally just let it go like a cloud, right? Passing by, and I can focus on all this other magic because it's there.
And witnessing your journey, again, I think simultaneously kind of does scare me sometimes when I see you posting certain things. I'm like, oh my God, because that internalized voice wants to come in and protect you, right? Just like my mom wanted to protect me. But then it's also pushing me into my next evolution. I'm like, nah, dude, she's fucking doing that. Like, how can I, step into that,
Yeah. So, so community has been the biggest source of support for me in that evolution. Some of the stuff that I did was, during that time, like over the course of the last 3 years, I kind of have been more open and accepting of a queer identity, of my own queer identity, I should say. And I think with that has come a lot of liberation too, because then it's not just the cis female experience, but the really questioning like where I belong, where I fit in, and I find that in queer spaces I do feel more free because guess what? I'm queer, like and to me that just means that I don't do what most people are doing. I'm doing different things. I'm trying whatever feels best for me. And I don't necessarily want to commit to a certain identity, take a certain side. I'm open to love in any form that feels right, and that includes platonic love. That includes, non-sexual, intimate love. I love all of it, and it's really just about like connection for me. So that's been really fun to explore. And then at the same time, like exploring what that looks like in my expression, the other community that I got a lot of support from was the pussy empowerment community that I worked with last year. I took her name's Alyssa Arapacio. She's a sex worker and a teacher. And that's something I wanted to name too, is like, I want to give gratitude where it's due to like sex workers really for paving the way for a lot of these like female or women or femme empowered spaces, because like they've been like taking power, you know, into their sexuality and being you know, imprisoned and shamed and disregarded in society in some cases, just because you know they're doing this type of work, even though it's like one of the oldest professions to ever live. And like the early
Mary
sex workers
Magdalene.
were right. And even further back, the earliest sex workers were fucking deities. You know what I mean? Like there's a reason that we've been fed shame around sex work, because of the fear of what could happen if there you have all these empowered ass people who are like, fucking pay me for what I know I possess that I can give to you. And what do you think is going to happen if we're all running around like that? You know what I mean? So anyway, I just want to,
I love that, because I think archaeologists, right, who were male and white, always read like female deities that were naked or pregnant or large or just fertile as prostitutes. Even back then, right, they kind of pigeoned them into this patriarchal story when really they were goddesses, deities, diosas, you know.
right.
So I love that. I love it naming that.
And so I think learning from people with, you know, very different values and lifestyles than what I grew up around, which was Catholicism, you know, lots of sexual shame, that it really expanded my brain a little bit. It opened my mind to, you know, where a lot of conditioning has happened. And then in that, finding like-minded folks who, you know, are doing things that maybe I see myself doing, you know. I'm like, I see Alyssa out there shaking her ass, looking hot as fuck. I'm like, I want to do that. That looks like so much fun, you know? Why the fuck not? And then I actually found her listening to a podcast, and I joined her class, and she we worked through a lot of this stuff, you know, a lot of we worked through a lot of like movement, and she would kind of give us tips for like ways to move our bodies. And the more that I did it, the more I felt like, God, this feels fucking good. Why haven't I been doing this forever? Oh, that's right, because I was shamed. Oh, that's right, because I look like I'm being too sexual when I move this way. And so as you're moving through it, it's like you're working through that shadow, you know, all those voices that tell you it's not right. And in doing it anyway, and doing it in community, and doing it in a way that celebrates our sexuality in like a sex positive environment, is really powerful. And so I feel like I was given permission by this community, like that it's okay to be this way, you know, it's okay to express my sexuality openly and honestly. It feels right to me. It feels good. And what feels the best is when people like y'all see it and say, damn, like, how can I do that? You know, how can I do that? And then I'm like, come on, like, let's explore these things together, because I really do think that once we move through all of that shame, and we have more of an awareness, and we release it and we let it go, and then what's left is like our true authentic selves. And from that space is where we create the most beautiful things, because it's from our heart. It's not from anybody else's influence. It's from our true essence that we create the most beautiful projects and the most beautiful offerings. And then that's how we kind of like keep building our communities and help lift each other up, you know, and make sure we all have what we need to live a happy life, ideally. That's all I want, you know. I want to live a life of peace. I want to have peace of mind. I don't want to be so worried about what other people think, that I'm not doing what I actually want to be doing, which is creating art, sharing my story, you know, spending time with my loved ones, and really taking life easy.
Yeah, I think I love it. I think there's so much to think about there, right? Like that movement, that sensual movement, and how, like you said, it's working through shadows, and you're like quite literally physically working through that shame, right? Releasing that shame.
I'm here for it, Renee. I think you are too. I think that's our next level. We're gonna
it is my next level. I mean, it's been living in me.
Maybe we won't publish it at first, but whatever. We can be there. We can do that. It's exciting. I think using our bodies.
Let me ask you this, and feel free to say it's too personal, but I'm curious. Have you ever pretended
Tell me.
it's funny like the way it's about to come out. Have you ever pretended to be the guy in sex, like move your body the way he has to like fuck you, like move your like, you know, thrust your hips? I'm over here doing it.
I have.
Okay.
I can't get into too many details, but yes.
Okay, so the way that I've been relaying this is like we all possess that same power. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We all do. It's just that we've been conditioned as femme presenting people to like be the receivers of that power,
be the passive,
not get right. Exactly. And not possess that power ourselves, when in reality, we actually have more, if anything, because we are so divinely tapped into the spiritual realm where our little humans come from. When they come through us, you know. And I know that like we, you know, people with penises and testicles have their own spiritual form when they carry you know, they carry the sperm into conjoin with the egg. But like I don't really want to like compare, but like we there's a reason that patriarchy has kept us from knowing our power, because with that we are so powerful, you know. I'm thinking about, not to get too political, but I'm thinking about what's happening in Iran right now, seeing all the women and femmes getting together and freaking putting their lives on the line, you know, to reclaim their autonomy. It's freaking powerful, and I'm really hoping that we learn to see that like this is the time for us to tear down all of these old systems and really have the world, see the world that we want to live in, where women are not living in an oppressed society around the world.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right in terms of speaking to the purposefulness. I mean, I think Cristina is the one who says it all the time. They do it on purpose, right? Like, of course they know that as life givers, right? The power that we have, right? If cis men could have babies, you better believe they would weaponize that shit, right? Like they would be weaponizing that and to say like, look, this is proof that we're superior, right? That we're gods and all of this shit. And so they downplay that in so many ways, right? Because they do recognize that, like you said, if we truly stepped into as a collective, right? If we stepped into the power and the abundance of power in that, we could take over the world. And that's what they're afraid of.
I love it. It's coming back to like, you know, this pre-patriarchal kind of conversation, or not just chronologically, but like there are spaces, right? Native indigenous spaces that are they've never been patriarchal. It's so beautiful to think about them, like where bleeding and giving life is so honored.
I mean, I talk about this with my classes a lot when we talk about like reproductive justice and speaking about it in terms of matriarchal communities, that there was so much reverence for those who menstruated, so much reverence for those who gave life, right? Because they understood. I mean, we fucking grew humans inside of us. Like when I think about it sometimes, and then like we breastfed and thinking like I kept my child alive solely on my body. Like that was always the trippiest. I think I don't miss being pregnant. But I think if there was something I did miss, breastfeeding was always something very powerful for me that I did enjoy, you know, until I didn't, and then I was done. But I did enjoy that. And I think it was always like understanding like how powerful it is to be able to, you know, produce this life-giving, you know, I don't know, life-giving nutrition, right? Nutrients from our bodies. But I love Dana, you talking about just the movement, and it has me thinking of when I did like my yoga certification, we talked a lot about how much like in the psoas, right, like around the hips, that's where a lot of our stored emotions and trauma. And so that the more we move or able to get movement and flexibility, the more that trauma is able to be released. And so I think that's a sensual sexual movement all comes from there, right? Like that hip movement, and
Absolutely.
how much we're like sexuality is, and even the act of sex is a spiritual, emotional experience. I do
I love
think
all the science that you're
that's our
bringing in. I
next,
really love it,
yeah,
Renee. I do. I think it's
that's our next
Yeah.
we got to go take some classes.
Yeah. So
I think there's fear. I do think that I mean, I'm sure Cristina, there's
well,
still a lot
Renee
of
knows I
fear.
have like this like fearless side, and I have this totally feared controlled side. So I mean, you can see it. So I want to tap more. I want to integrate. I want to like make it not so binary within myself too. But there is definitely there. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
there's fear.
that's another community that I've tapped into more recently. There's a space in Newport Beach that it's called the Newport Peach. Sorry, it's not in Newport Beach. It's in Costa Mesa, but
Mm,
it's called Newport Peach. And
mm,
my friend Nettie, I'm gonna give her a shout out. She runs a class every Thursday that's just like it's called the Ritual Room.
Yeah.
And it has
You've
really just
invited me,
become,
right? Yeah.
yeah, it's just become such a like important part of my week to just get away and move my body in ways that feel good. It
Mm,
doesn't necessarily have to be sexual. It's just
mhm,
like sometimes it's just like being in the because it's such a vibe there. Like, she's playing
mm.
like really like great music and the lighting and then you're coming into a space knowing it's like sex positive, so it's like move your body
mm,
however you want. Nobody cares, nobody's judging, everyone's in
Yeah,
their own like in their own space, and
yeah.
she gives us guidance, but we have a lot of space to just freestyle and just do what feels good. And that's really made a big difference for that exact reason, Renee, that you're mentioning. Like there's all these these spaces in our body where we carry trauma, we carry tension,
mhm.
we carry pressure. And a lot of times we don't even feel it because we're so used to it. We just kind of numb out sometimes. And so
Yeah,
doing this type of movement has helped me get out of that dissociative space
Yeah.
where I can actually be in my body and see like, oh damn, I'm really tense in my glutes right now. Let me shake them a
Mm,
little, like get it out. It's
Mhm,
therapeutic.
yeah,
um and it's made a huge difference in how I feel in my body.
mhm,
And also I think in opening up these channels of creativity that lead me to do the things that I'm doing, like you're mentioning some of the stuff you've seen. Like I have like some photo shoots and things that I've been working on with a friend of mine who owns a lingerie company. And we've had so much fun just like coming up with
mhm,
creative ways to market her product, and
mhm,
in ways that it helped me engage in more play, in more expression, in more opportunities to like push myself a little bit further and see like how far can I go with this, with like doing what feels good and being unapologetic about it,
mm,
because
yeah.
what might be fun to me,
mm,
maybe some people see it and they're like, I don't want to see that, but that's cool. If you don't want to see it, you don't have to be here, but for
yeah,
the people who see it and they're like, damn, like I want to do that. That looks fun. Or where was that? Or how do I get that lingerie? Or,
yeah,
where can I take classes? Like, where can I get involved? Those are the
yeah,
folks that I want to be in community with right now, because the more we have community around
Mhm,
us who is supportive of our exploration around our expression, specifically around sexuality and sensuality,
yeah,
um, the safer we can feel to express it. It is hard to do it by yourself, I feel like, because if we're on our own, we are just
mhm,
replaying those like
mm,
narratives, and
mhm,
mm,
we can
mm,
work through it on our own. But when you're in these spaces where it's like very safe
mhm.
to explore this, it makes all the difference. And I feel like
yeah,
that would be like my biggest tip to anyone who's like feeling like they want to tap in, but
Mhm.
there's fear, is like find a space and do some, do some research in your area to see like, where your people are. There's a lot of wonderful leaders in the community who are helping reclaim sexuality and its magical purposes in our lives.
Yeah.
I wanted to say too, I think what's being maybe unnamed here, which I think should be named, is, before I gave birth, before baby, before, like I did some burlesque in San Francisco, and I was thinking about the crowd of people there. And I was thinking about how expressive I felt. And I was thinking about Marianismo too, and all these things about maybe there's a lot coming up for me as a mother, as a mama, like what is that? And I love also, so here's the difference, that was such a young, single, maybe white space, and so I would love for you to name how these spaces, what I'm seeing in them is that, so maybe I'm gonna name them, but like there's different bodies, there's different gender expressions, there's different like there's a welcome, there is this space is for people like us. I don't know, like not single, no baby, whatever, like I feel like this is a space
I
that
think
we would feel very like welcome in.
what I hear you saying is, I think there was a time, and I would agree for myself that like, I think before kids, there was a freedom maybe to express sexuality in a way that it definitely is tied to Marianismo, right? The idea that once you become a mother, that is your sole core identity. And so to be sexual and to be a mother goes against, not just gender norms, but it goes against, all norms. And so I think for you to be a mother and to be reclaiming that from that perspective, that's definitely been a challenge for me. Is I think I was a little bit more, well, I mean, I am sexual all the way around, but I think there was a freedom, before I had kids, and now it's like, there's just like almost like compartmentalization of that.
And I feel hyper watched as a mom too, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, I feel that, and I get some of that pressure too, but the way that I see it is like yes, I'm a mom, and how the fuck do you think I ended up being a mom? I had sex. So if you think that being a mom is not inherently sexual too,
yeah,
I, and not in like a, like, again, we have to stop thinking about sex as P and V, or as Cristina said, which I love, phallocentric, like that's not it, that's just the like, that's just like the boring vanilla version of what we were taught sex is. Okay. There's so much more that we're not getting into,
I love it.
And I love the conversation. When does it become sexual too? Like I think it's all sexual, right? That's a thing.
Yeah.
And
but also these spaces are run by or led by women of color. That's too, right? I think that's also what I want to hear names like.
Yeah. Well, the spaces that I've participated in, yes. But see, that's part of my research, is like I have been looking for the right people for me, and I realize not everyone's going to be the right person for anyone listening. Personally, I have also started to like teach workshops and hold circles and do more one-on-one guidance around this. But I understand that like I'm not going to be the right person for everyone, so I'm naming these also so people can see like you might have to find a couple different communities to get the needs you have met. Like I said, I became part of this queer community around the Queer Mercado in East LA. It's a weekly market, and like we never had anything like that growing up, just right down the street from there in Montebello. So to see that kind of community in like what I would consider my hometown area, like has been really awesome and inspirational. And then I was playing with my band there most months, and just meeting the community and interacting with the vendors and just seeing what the organizers are doing. They're doing so many, so many wonderful things, but just like networking and getting to know people and talking to them and getting to know their stories. Like we all have stories, and the more, I personally believe, the more we share our story, the more we can find our people, because more often than not, we have a lot in common. And if we don't, we can still learn a lot from each other, you know? So getting involved in those communities, and sorry, I got distracted.
No, I mean, I think that I was going to say, I think there, I mean, we can talk forever about this. I think we should probably wrap up, but the last thing I wanted to just mention, I think an experience that I remember having, especially in my breastfeeding time, was I remember people often on one hand saying that shaming breastfeeding, because especially breastfeeding in public, right? Because there was this notion that, you know, if you breastfeed in public, like that's sexual, right? And like the sexualization of breastfeeding. And so I think a lot of people's response to that in the attempt to respond to that was to say that breasts are, you know, for feeding children, right? And although I understood that also kind of like, I felt very limited by that, because it just kind of said, okay,
it's like saying sex is for procreation.
Exactly. And I was like, no, breasts are both for feeding our children and for our own sexual pleasure, right? Because it was like, oh, a man is going to sexualize you if you are breastfeeding. And I was like, okay, cool, but my breasts as erogenous zones have nothing to do with how somebody is looking at me. So I always like felt uncomfortable saying, like, it was, you know what I mean? Again, it was compartmentalizing rather than saying I'm this whole human being that can be both a mother and a sexual being, you know, and a sexual person. And anyway, that was the kind of last thing I wanted to mention, but we do have to wrap up.
She remembered her thought, and then we want to have people find you. That's the other thing. I just want
that's what I was gonna say.
I'll share that. Okay, so I think I got distracted and I didn't answer the question about being a mom and being sexual. So for me, I have done my best to teach my daughter about sex in an age appropriate way since she was little, whether that was like using the correct anatomical terms when talking about our bodies, or having books. And, you know, I'm a birth worker. I teach people how they're going to give birth, about where babies come from. You know what I mean? So it's kind of been like very organic for us to have these conversations. And I mentioned that because to me, the only person whose opinion I really care about is hers. If I'm doing something that makes her feel uncomfortable and she's like, I'm afraid, like she has her own fears, right? About what people are going to think or what people say or what, I'm like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about where that fear is coming from, you know? Because she's only 10, but she already has her own ideas of what is right and what is wrong, you know? She kind of jokes about my escapades a little. She's like, you're going to go to your booty shaking class? And I am, you know, but I explained to her, just like I was saying a minute ago, about how it's therapeutic, it's medicine for me, because I hold so much tension in that area. It's like going to therapy for me, you know, but I'm exercising my body. And so, again, her opinion is really the only one that I care about. But for people who ask, like, how could you put yourself out there in this way? Some people have told me, like, in an overly sexual way. And what does that say about your parenting? I would say that it teaches my child that I'm not afraid of who I am. And I'm not afraid to let people see who I am, because posing half naked in my chonies, like, I enjoy the way it feels when I do it. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel liberated. And it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks, as long as I know that what I'm doing feels good and I'm not hurting anyone.
And you're not hurting anyone.
Yeah. Then why should I feel apologetic, you know? So
to be who you
again, it's really about like detaching from what others are thinking or saying, because we've put so much value in that in the past, when really we need to learn how to listen to our own intuition. What feels good for me? I went through so many years of not even knowing what I liked anymore, because I had contorted myself to fit what other people liked, or what I thought they wanted me to like, you know? And so all of this has been about exploring what's true for me. and it's in that space that I've been able to kind of emerge in this way and feel really good about it. So
Yeah.
that was my answer to that question.
Yeah. So to wrap up, we appreciate everything you said. This is what we've been dying to get back to, is just these like talks with our comadres where we're just like, deep diving on these topics. Like, I'm like, this is our magic right here. This is our medicine, being able to create these conversations. So we appreciate it. And yes, please tell people where they can find you, how they can work with you.
Yes. So you can find me for now on Instagram, since they just let me back. My Instagram handle is at the Multidimensional Mami. Mami is spelled Mami. You can also go to my website at danelliaarechiga.com. Hopefully you guys can link that somewhere, because I'm not.
We will put them in the show notes for sure.
Okay. And then the way that you can work with me is, right now I am taking some birth clients, and I'm mostly taking postpartum clients, but just get in touch with me on Instagram and see what I have at the link in my bio. That's going to be the best way to kind of know what I'm doing right now. I'm always doing something different. I work with a variety of clients, whether you're a birth client or just someone who is interested in sexual wellness. And
with Latinx parenting, right, these days too.
Yes. And I'm also working with Latinx parenting as part of their outreach team. So anything related to birth, parenting, sexuality, liberation, using your voice, speaking your truth, storytelling, like learning how to just really step into your true, authentic self, hit me up. I want to meet you. And I'm really focused on building my in-person community right now, because for everything I just mentioned in this episode, like being together in our medicine is so important. And I really want to meet the people who are down to do this work together and support each other. So yeah.
Love.
Well, thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the space. Love you guys. Love y'all.